So I became aware of some issues on a project, and I haven't talked to that person about making this video, so I'm not going to mention anything about that. I'm just going to go through what I want to go through, and it's basically dealing with bracing, temporary and permanent bracing of, buildings that have these, that are long and open structures, and that were initially designed without any shear walls. And so you really have two issues in buildings like this. You have bracing, you have temporary bracing and permanent bracing. And your temporary bracing obviously is the bracing that you deal with when you're building the building. So, and one thing I just realized is that I forgot to draw the bracing, and so I'll have to stop at some point and do that. But I just wanted to get this started because it might be a little bit long, and I wanted to go ahead and get some things out of my head that are in my head. So what we're concerned with here on these buildings, and don't pay any attention to these windows. These walls are actually from another project. I just kind of stole them for this one. The point here is that you have these long framed walls, and they're not, the desire is to have one big open space. And the problem you have with that is shear from wind mainly, that's been the biggest problem I have seen with buildings like this. And so for the longest time, codes really didn't deal with this, I guess, until we started seeing multiple building failures, either during construction or after construction. But the code, the residential code, international residential code does deal with this, and now, or when I say now, for the past, I don't know, as long as I can remember, maybe 15, 20 years or so, requires shear walls. And so I'm going to give examples of those, but what I want to do is kind of start from the beginning on a project like this, and just keep it sort of basic, and back off and pretend like we're actually building this thing. And if we were doing that, we would, this building would actually be, this wall, I'm sorry, we're going to call this wall number one. This wall would actually be laying on the floor. So we're going to take it and we're going to lay it down as if we were building this thing, and do just that. So we've got this thing all framed up. Let's pretend it's laying on the floor, and we got a bunch of guys. Now, honestly, on a wall like this, you might even break it up into 3 or 4 sections, maybe 3. You wouldn't necessarily want to build a 108-foot wall all in one section. So that really kind of goes to this point even more about temporary bracing, in that if you were to even build this wall in 2 pieces, you would want to have just temporary bracing to hold it, stand it up, and brace it off while you're standing up the other half. But for the sake of this argument, let's just, or discussion, we're not having an argument yet, are we? So let's pretend we got a bunch of our guys up here, and now we've stood the wall up. Okay, now we got a bunch of guys and holding the wall up, and we're like, oh, how do we let go of this thing? We can't, because just any kind of wind at all would possibly blow it over. So at this point, I just realized I'm going to have to go make myself some temporary bracing. Okay, so I've got myself some bracing here, and let's just pretend that we've stood the wall up, and this is just going to be temporary bracing to hold this for today. We're going to assume that it took about, we're going to say that we can build the 2 outer walls in one day, and that this bracing would be good enough to hold this wall overnight. Okay, these corner braces are nailed up on the outside of the corner, so that wall number, what would that be? Wall number 3. Wall number 3. Wall number 4. wall number 4 can be built without removing that brace. You see? So that brace, where's my floor framing? Floor joist. Okay. I think I turn those off because they show through the subfloor sometimes, and that gets annoying. But it looks like it's going to be okay. But that brace is going to be nailed to the side of the floor joist right there, and to the end of the wall, so that you can stand up this wall without having to take that brace off. When you nail this brace on, this wall is going to be plumb. This wall that you just put up, that's going to be the purpose of that brace, to get it good and plumb. We're going to turn off wall 4 for now because we haven't built it yet. But see, on each end, you're going to have that brace, that sort of semi-permanent brace that you're not going to be taking off until you put your wall sheeting on. Okay, so now we're going to look at, and that's why I had those joists turned off, because they show through, and it's annoying me, sorry. So let's turn on wall number 2 now, and it's standing up, but we just stood it up, right? And you're going to have people holding it while you do the same method of bracing here. We're going to take that and we're going to copy that, then we're going to oh, there we go. Then we're going to move it on over. Let me lock my axis here, and you're just going to bring it over. What you don't want is the 2x4 sticking over the wall, because again, these braces, you don't want these intermediate braces out here sticking over the wall out here, because you're going to put the sheeting on the wall before you take these braces down. Okay, these are semi-permanent braces. Until you get all the roof decking on, all the wall sheeting on, you're not going to take these braces off. Okay, this is the mistake you see, is people not looking at the bracing systematically. Okay, so now we're going to build number 3, wall number 3, because you build your first 2 your longest walls first, and then you would build. Let's go ahead and demonstrate this, because I'm going to kind of drive this home, that this wall, see, this wall here is built. Can't see it because the top plate overlaps, but this wall is inside the 2 outside walls. So that means it can be built on the floor, laying down, after these 2 walls are up, okay? And then on this, because well, what we're going to do now is take, and to brace this wall in this direction, we're going to take another 2x4 like this, and let's see if I can do this without it taking too much time. I could literally probably do this quicker in the field instead of drawing it, but I'm going to try to do it without taking too much time here. And again, it might seem like I'm being picky on how I place these, but you don't want this wall. You don't want this brace sticking up above this wall, because again, these braces are going to stay on until you do your trusses. Okay, you're not gonna take this brace off. Okay, so you got one there, and I almost wish I had made this bracing component, because what I meant to do is bring this one over here. If I can get the axis locked. like that, okay? Again, there you go. Now, you just stood that wall up, and now you've got a corner brace here, a corner brace here. That's now bracing the wall. The walls are being racked back and forth this way, okay? Now, you're going to take one of these types of braces that have the block on the floor, okay? And you're going to copy it and you're going to spin it around. You probably could get by with one of these, you know, 90, yep. And you could probably put it on either side of this either side of the door. It would be probably just fine. Again, check to make sure it's not sticking out of the wall. Here, let's see, I need to move it over a little bit. This is the problem again you get into trying to draw this stuff. Okay. So now you've got at least a brace on this wall, right? And you're straightening the walls too. I meant to mention this. Before you nail these, you want to, look down the wall, pull a string down the wall, and it might be a little early to do this, but you want to get the wall halfway straight before you nail these braces off, like that, right? You want to at least have somebody eyeballing it, because before you put your roof trusses on, you're going to pull a string down this long wall, and you may have to loosen, these nails in this one, and push the wall in or out. It's hard to get them straight until you get all your walls up. Now, since there are very few walls along this long wall, just the two shear walls that I'm going to show in a minute, then you might want to go ahead and pull a string on that wall and get those pretty straight to begin with. But then, now we're going to show wall number 4 being built. Again, it was built on the floor and raised up in this position, and it was nailed, at the corner, nailed into this corner right here, and eventually you put your double top plate on. That's one thing about these walls. They don't have this double top plate on the corner until you raise it up, and then you'd finish out your top plates. But then again, same thing down here. You'd have let's see, take this, we're going to copy these braces, and we're going to move them down here, and we're going to spin them around 90. Oh, I'm sorry. That'd be 180, wouldn't it? Let me get this lined up on the wall first properly. And then we'll bring it down. Again, this would be, I'm not trying to be super accurate with this, I just want to represent it, in a real way. Okay, so now you've got your braces on this wall. After you've stood it up, you built it on the floor, you raised it up, you nailed these end studs into that corner really good, and you say, wow, this wall is a little wanky, so it's not perfectly straight. So you grab a brace, nail a block on the floor, and get the wall straight, and then you're good. Okay, all that time you had this wall, this brace here was already here, right? And you're not going to take it off yet. Okay, and I'm going to tell you when you can take that brace off. So let's say for some reason this building was not didn't have all these windows and it was just studs, which in most cases they are when they're open like this. They don't have all these windows in them. This was, again, those windows were for another project I just stole these walls off of. So let's pretend you were able to get all these walls up in a day. Okay, that would have been kind of hard to do unless you were using pre-cut studs. You might have been able to do it, but if you had to leave this overnight, guess what? It's fine, right? If you're doing these walls in sequence, and say you only get 2 walls built, let's say you just get this wall and this wall built, okay, and you have it braced off properly, it's fine. You can leave it overnight. No harm done. You absolutely do not want to put any sheeting on this wall until you are finished framing up all the walls and bracing it off. Okay. In this particular case that I'm talking about, that I really didn't give a lot of detail on, one of the walls had sheeting put on it before all of the walls were framed and braced. Okay, and they had a windstorm. The wind caught that wall that was sheeted and knocked the whole building down. It actually had roof trusses already up on it. Okay, and what happened was, since it wasn't braced like this, the wind caught that wall, pushed the whole thing over, and the whole building racked. And the wall that was sheeted just laid right over. Okay, well, I have pictures, but I can't show them. I didn't get permission to show them, so I can't. So we're trying to work through this in a systematic way, and this would be, if you had an open building, this would be the minimal. Really, a couple of extra braces wouldn't hurt anything. Especially now, the reason I'm only showing this many braces right now is because of the next subject I'm going to speak about are shear walls, and to provide the proper shear, resistance to shear, you would need our walls type 5. And what these are going to be, and you can kind of lay these out kind of how you want to, as long as they don't exceed like 35 feet, is the code for residential buildings in the United States. The International Building Code, International Residential Code. So I'm just showing them at thirds here, and again, these windows aren't really here. Now, what you can do is kind of incorporate these shear walls into your design. Say you have bunks in this building, and you count out the spacing you need, the number of bunks, and you put these walls in between 2 sets of bunks, that kind of thing. But you absolutely do need these shear walls, and in the particular building that did collapse, these were not a part of the design, and were part of the problem. Because even if they didn't have the bracing, let's just say you deleted the bracing. I thought I'd put all that in the same. Then it would have probably survived a light wind. Okay, if you had the shear walls. But I gotta put my bracing back. But you can see now why I spaced the temporary bracing the way I did, because the next day, or even if you were lucky the same day, I don't think you could get all this framed up in one day. It would take a couple of days. But now you're going to come back, and because you planned these braces out, you're going to start to go ahead and build your shear walls. And the way these shear walls are built is just whatever the height of this wall is the length of the wall, because what you're looking for is a diagonal brace of about 45 degrees, like that. Okay, and the way they're made, I'll just go ahead and show you the sheeting is on those, and you might want to go ahead and put the sheeting on these walls. Well, actually, not yet. I'll take that back, because these walls need to be fastened. Let's see if I can turn off the floor plate. The floor plate and turn the floor joist back on. These walls, now that just worked out pretty good, but these walls need to be securely secured to the floor framing, because the whole point of these is that you're taking the load, the lateral load of a wind load, and you're transferring it down at that angle to the floor. Okay, that's going to resist it. And you're also going to be fastening it to the roof trusses, which I know I'm not going to have blocking right now, but I'm just going to show you. Okay, that one, well, we got lucky, right? We can fasten this wall to this truss, you know, we can mechanically fasten that to, that's actually a perfect situation there. But let's see how our other one worked out. Well, I can't believe they both worked out under trusses. Dang it! If this wall was, you know, in between these trusses, then you would need to put blocking between the trusses, probably over 2 feet or 16 inches, and because you'd want 1, 2, 3, at least 3 along this wall. And so then before you put your sheeting on, before you put your plywood, you know, on the shear wall, you'd want to make sure that you were fastening this wall plate into the blocking that's in between the trusses, like that. I'm going to put that wall back just for the fun of it, and I'm going to turn my trusses off. Okay. So now you've got all 4 of your shear walls framed up, right? But now here's the rule on this, okay? Once you start, you want to plan this out. Really, the ideal situation would be that you would sheet these walls. So if I can zoom in here, put the sheeting on these walls and just do it systematically. You know, you want to get all the wall sheeting up. If for some reason you did have any windows, you don't want to cut them out. You just want to get your sheeting up, okay, as quickly as you can on all 4 of your walls, okay? And then you're going to come back, and after you've, well, okay, so I kind of broke my own rule here. I'm going to take this all back because I really made a mistake. You see, I got ahead of myself, and that's what you tend to do. You get excited, you get your walls up, you're like, hey, I'm ready to put wall sheeting up. No, you really don't want to do that. You really want to go ahead and get your roof trusses up, okay? And because all this bracing needs to stay on there all the way through the roof trusses and the roof decking, okay? And while you were installing your trusses, you want to make sure that you have all these diagonal braces in for your roof. Your roof trusses need to be braced properly too. Okay, you would want to have purlins spaced out through here, and you want to have diagonal bracing in your roof also. And then you get your roof decking on, and you get it, and you might even want to put your metal roof on. Turn my roof deck. I like to turn that stuff off that's underneath. Okay. You wouldn't have to, but I would go ahead. Honestly, while you're doing all this work on the roof, you got a bunch of guys up there nailing and screwing off stuff. You might as well get it all done and leave these braces on, okay, through all that. And then when you get your roof on, I'm going to turn all that stuff off, but just so we can see. Now let's pretend we got all of our roof, you know, roofing on, all the decking and everything. And now, you know, now you go and come back, and the only braces you'd want to take off now are these outside braces that you had to put on when you were doing your first walls. So I'm going to leave them on there, but let's oops, I'm turning on the wrong thing. to my sheeting. So we're going to put all that on, and now here's the thing. The reason it is important to have these temporary wall braces is because even though you're going to frame these, even though you may have this sheeting on, you may be taking advantage of these walls to put electrical in, like you may have an outlet or something. But if you don't, you just need to go ahead and get the sheeting on them too. Okay. Then when you're sure you're done, then you go and take your braces down. And now you got a building that's going to resist wind forces on that. So I didn't really plan this video, but very well. But I'm hoping that it'll give some idea of how important temporary bracing and permanent bracing through shear walls are, and just how important permanent bracing is in with the roof, the trusses, every place in the building. And so I hope that did some good. And we will see you in the next video.